Hello everyone, this is Wandering Tati. This time I would like to talk about failures we all have from time to time when applying logic. So in this video we are going to discuss and give examples of some of the most common logical fallacies. These are errors we can find in the way we argue and that all of us commit, so there is no shame in that. But I think it is valuable to learn them. This way we will have the tools to detect them on ourselves and therefore not present faulty arguments that do not actually support the point we are trying to make, or to be able to detect them in others and not accept or believe a claim that has been poorly argued for. Especially since not all logical fallacies we will encounter are going to be involuntary errors. Most of them probably are, but in some cases the person may know exactly what they are doing and use it as a dishonest tactic. As a clarification, the fact that someone commits a logical fallacy when discussing the truth value of a certain statement does not imply anything about the validity of the statement itself. All we can say is that it has been poorly argued for, but the statement might still be true, or not, we don't know. This is in fact something known as the fallacy, presuming that because a claim has been poorly argued or a fallacy was committed, then the claim itself must be wrong. It is possible to make a claim that is false yet argued with logical coherency for that claim, just as it is possible to make a claim that is true and justify it with fallacies and poor arguments. Let's start things off with a fun one. This one is known as argumentum ad nazium, or sometimes referred to as the Hitler card. It consists of criticizing or rejecting an idea simply because it was Hitler or the Nazis who espoused it. You've probably seen this one, it happens a lot in discussions, when people want to have a gotcha moment with their counterpart and might present a phrase and get the other person to agree with it and then say something like, "Aha, but you know who said that? It was Hitler!" As if the thing in question is simply wrong because Hitler happened to say so, whatever this thing may be. Perhaps even trying to imply that you agreeing with a random, out-of-context quote that Hitler happened to say makes you somehow equivalent to Hitler. Do you like puppies? You know who else liked puppies? Hitler. Are you a vegetarian? You know who else was a vegetarian? Hitler. Do you enjoy tap dancing? You know who else enjoyed tap dancing? My friend Tom. But for a second I made you think it was Hitler. Anyway, you get the point, right? Whether it's Hitler or other nefarious character, just because they said something doesn't make the thing in question immediately wrong. But don't get me wrong, the things that they are infamous for are definitely wrong. But they are wrong for reasons that we can explain and justify. They are not simply wrong because they said or did them. Now, in a sense, on the opposite side of the spectrum we have appeal to authority. This fallacy occurs when someone says that because an authority thinks something, it must therefore be true. A necessary clarification before we proceed. This fallacy should not be used to dismiss the claims of experts or the scientific consensus. Appeals to authority are not valid arguments, but neither is it reasonable to just disregard the claims of experts who have a demonstrated depth of knowledge unless one has a similar level of understanding and/or access to empirical evidence. However, it is entirely possible that the opinion of a person or institution of authority is wrong. Therefore, said authority does not have any intrinsic bearing upon whether the claims are true or not. I came across this fallacy while reading The Secret, for instance. In the book they claim, indemonstrably may I add, that Einstein knew about the secret. And if Einstein says something is true, then it must be true, right?
Wrong.
Another example of this may be citing the really small percentage of climate scientists who disagree with the evidence on human-induced global warming while totally ignoring the majority of researchers. And sometimes the authority in question is not even an authority in a field relevant to the thing that we are discussing. Like, for instance, saying we should take certain dubious alternative treatments just because Gwyneth Paltrow recommends them. As they mention in this book, simply the best way to avoid committing this fallacy is to recognize that no one person is sufficient authority to make something true by herself, even when the authority is appropriate and an expert in the field under discussion, this doesn't mean that the argument stops with her. Just because I pull out Dr. Stephen Hawking's book on black holes when arguing with someone about them doesn't mean that he must concede my point. What really matters is what the book says. Are his arguments good? Do they make sense? Are they supported by the evidence? Just because it is Hawking's book isn't enough. It is the content that matters. So simply, the problem with inappropriate appeal to authority is that it ignores content in favor of credentials and power. If we are going to make well-reasoned arguments, we must look deeper than the identity of the people whose arguments we are espousing. Another quite common fallacy is ad hominem. This is Latin for to the person. The fallacy occurs when someone irrelevantly attacks the person making the argument rather than the argument or position itself. The fallacious attack can also be directed to members of a certain group or institution. Some common examples include phrases like, "You have no idea what you're talking about. You've only lived here for 6 months. It's hard to take your claims seriously because you spend your days playing video games. Steve thinks Earth is flat, so who knows what other crazy stuff he believes." It is ridiculous to hear that man from Venezuela complaining about America's poverty. Venezuela has twice as much poverty as America has ever had. What we should ask ourselves in these cases is, how relevant are the proponent's circumstances, character, and credibility to the quality of his argument or position? If you encounter this fallacy yourself, you may, for instance, acknowledge the attack and then move on with the debate. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with the attack. Rather, it means that you have to show that you're aware of it, which might look better than ignoring it entirely. To do this, you can use language such as, "I get that you think that I'm X, but that doesn't have anything to do with what we're discussing here, so I'm not going to address it." Another popular fallacy is the bandwagon fallacy. Also known as the appeal to the masses or appeal to common belief fallacy, it happens when you appeal to popularity or the fact that many people do something as an attempted form of validation. This argument is flawed since popularity of an idea has absolutely no bearing on its validity. If it did, then the Earth would have made itself flat for most of history to accommodate this popular belief. This fallacy most likely occurs because of two factors. The first one is that us humans want to fit in and are therefore influenced by norms. And second, we believe a group of people must be better informed than we are as individuals, so we are quick to change our minds if the majority of people all believe the same thing. This tendency is also what drives us to succumb to peer pressure. It makes decision making easier by eliminating the need to think critically about the topic at hand. If everyone else is doing something, then they can't all be wrong, right? Oh, but surely they can. There's a famous experiment by Solomon Asch regarding conformity, which found that humans' drive to conform with the group is so strong that people will actually choose incorrect answers to simple questions after watching others make the same incorrect choices.
Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. All right, we'll proceed in this order. You'll give your answer.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the 5th person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
2, 2, 2,
2,
2, 3, 3, 3, 3,
But on the 3rd trial, something happens.
2, 2,
2,
2, 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
The next fallacy we're going to discuss is the straw man. It happens if you misrepresent someone's argument in order to make it easier to attack. By exaggerating, misrepresenting, or just completely fabricating someone's argument, it's much easier to present your own position as being reasonable. But this kind of dishonesty undermines honest, rational debate. And this one seems to be the politician's bread and butter. An example could be something like this. Politician A says, "I will vote to increase the budget for road construction." And then politician B goes, "Why don't you care about education?" A's support for more money for road construction does not immediately imply a lack of support for education. Person A does not even mention education at all. Or perhaps we may encounter this fallacy while debating some controversial issues. It's appalling to me that the people who oppose the death penalty believe the lives of convicted murderers are more important than the lives of their victims. This alone shows that the opponents of capital punishment are wrong. Another example, this one taken directly from reality, Starbucks decides to write Happy Holidays on their cups instead of Merry Christmas. After this, the media is outraged, accusing Starbucks of waging a war on Christmas. A good approach to prevent yourself from committing this fallacy is to instead try to steelman your opponent's argument by considering it in the most charitable and positive way possible, and perhaps repeating it back to them until they agree that what they hear from you is an accurate description of their point of view. Only then you may proceed to criticize their argument. Afterwards we have appeal to emotion. It happens when there's an attempt to manipulate an emotional response in place of a valid or compelling argument. It includes appeals to fear, envy, hatred, pity, pride, and more. One clarification. Sometimes a logically coherent argument may inspire emotion or have an emotional aspect, but the problem and fallacy occurs when emotion is used instead of a logical argument, or to obscure the fact that no compelling rational reason exists for one's position. Most people are affected by emotions, and so appeals to emotion are a very common and effective argument tactic, but they are ultimately flawed and dishonest ways to argue. Appeals to emotion may also try to support an argument by framing it as supporting of the rights of children in some way, a technique known as the "think of the children" fallacy. The goal of such arguments is to elicit a strong emotional response, as most people are very protective of children. One example could be the following. How can you say that the government shouldn't censor the internet? Think of the poor children who might be exposed to inappropriate content. Or even something like power lines cause cancer. I met a little boy with cancer who lived just 20 miles from a power line, who looked into my eyes and said, in his weak voice, "Please do whatever you can so that other kids won't have to go through what I'm going through. I urge you to vote for this bill to tear down all power lines and replace them with monkeys on treadmills." After that we have tu quoque. In this case, you avoided having to engage with criticism by turning it back on the accuser. You answered criticism with criticism. It translates as "you too" from Latin and is sometimes known as appeal to hypocrisy. Yes, if someone is being a hypocrite, we may point it out, but that is all we can do. Their hypocrisy has no bearing on the validity of what they are saying, whether they comply with it or not. This fallacious argument usually takes the hit of someone having to defend their argument and instead shifts the focus back on the other person making the criticism. Here we have an example from Futurama.
You can't just put people on display. It's cruel.
Cruel? Was it cruel when humans caged other primates in zoos for centuries?
Wait, I know the answer to this one. Yes.
Another example may be something like this. The parent says there is strong evidence for a link between smoking and chronic obstructive lung disease. Smoking is also associated with many other serious disorders. Smoking is unhealthy, so you should not smoke. And the child goes, "But you smoke yourself, so much for your argument against smoking." Next we have the black and white fallacy. This fallacy occurs when two alternatives are presented as the only possibilities, when in fact more possibilities exist. Also known as the false dilemma, this tactic has the appearance of forming a logical argument, but under closer scrutiny it becomes evident that there are more possibilities than the two presented. Binary black and white thinking doesn't allow for the many different variables, conditions, and contexts in which there would exist more than just the two possibilities put forth. It frames the argument misleadingly and obscures rational, honest debate.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
In reality, how nations respond to an attack on another nation involves more complexity, and certainly neutrality is a third option. But Bush's statement reduces their options to only two: with us or against us. Now we have loaded question. You might have seen this one before. Someone asks a question that had a presumption built into it so that it couldn't be answered without appearing guilty. These fallacies are particularly effective at derailing rational debates because of their inflammatory nature. The recipient of the loaded question is compelled to defend themselves and may appear flustered or on the back foot. Although its use may very well be accidental, it is commonly used as an intentional tactic by debaters and investigators. A classic example is the journalist asking a senator, "Have you stopped beating your wife?" A question that implicitly presupposes without justification that the senator has actually beaten his wife at some point in the past. If the senator fails to recognize the fallacy, he may appear to admit that he is guilty of a crime of which he may be innocent. Another example can be found in this episode of The Simpsons.
Bart Simpson, what do you hate most about this country? Is it the freedom?
Nash, I've realized something. I'm the worst kid in the world, and the last thing I deserve is forgiveness. But with a little help from Jesus and our fighting men and women overseas...
All right, so if I hear you correctly, you're saying America is better than Jesus. Do you agree? Before he can answer, do you?
Well, America's not perfect.
So America isn't perfect. Is that why you and your son hate us?
Next we have No True Scotsman. It may also be called an appeal to purity. It is a way to dismiss relevant criticisms or flaws of your argument. In this form of faulty reasoning, one's belief is rendered unfalsifiable because no matter how compelling the evidence is, one simply moves the goalposts so that it wouldn't apply to a supposedly true example. This is a way of avoiding valid criticisms of one's argument. This fallacy changes the definition of what it takes for something to be a member of a group in order to protect a claim from a supposed counterexample. It is frequently used in ideological discussions, like, for example, political or religious. The arguer committing the fallacy presumes to be an authority on determining what it takes to be a member of a certain group. Both the name of the fallacy and the definition were coined by Anthony Flew in 1977. This is a version of his original example. A nationalist-minded Scot reads about a heinous sex crime in the newspaper. Perturbed by what he is reading, he thinks to himself, "No Scotsman would ever do such a thing." Sometime later, our Scot spies a similar headline in the paper, except this time the perpetrator is identified as a Scotsman. Instead of admitting that even his compatriots are capable of committing depraved acts, our Scot thinks no true Scotsman would do such a thing. Next we have appeal to nature. It happens when someone argues that because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal. Well, you know what's natural? Cancer, hurricanes, murder, dolphins abusing other dolphins. Yes, it is true, it ruined my life to learn this. My friends the belugas would never do such a thing. And if they do, then please don't tell me, because I really need something to hold on to. Also, you know what's not natural? Vaccines, the plumbing system, books, anime. You know, some of the best things in life. This fallacy comes from the fact that many natural things are also considered good, and this can bias our thinking. But naturalness itself doesn't make something good or bad. And finally we have the slippery slope fallacy. You said that if we allow something X to happen, then some terrible thing Y will eventually happen too. Therefore, we should not allow X to happen. The problem with this reasoning is that it avoids engaging with the issue at hand, and instead shifts attention to some usually very extreme hypotheticals. Since no proof is presented to show that the extreme hypotheticals will in fact occur, this fallacy has the form of an appeal to fear. According to Patrick Hurley in a concise introduction to logic from 2012, the fallacy of slippery slope is a variety of the false cause fallacy. It occurs when the conclusion of an argument rests on an alleged chain reaction and there is no sufficient reason to think that the chain reaction will actually take place. One example could be something like, "We can't permit the sale of marijuana by doctor's prescription, because that will lead people to believe it's an acceptable drug. This will open the floodgates to the complete legislation of the drug for use by every pothead in the country." And we also have the ultimate comedic example of this fallacy in the form of a well-known DirecTV commercial.
When your cable company keeps you on hold, you get angry. When you get angry, you go blow off steam. When you go blow off steam, accidents happen. When accidents happen, you get an eye patch. When you get an eye patch, people think you're tough. When people think you're tough, people want to see how tough. And when people want to see how tough, you wake up in a roadside ditch. Don't wake up in a roadside ditch. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV.
That was the last fallacy I had planned for this video. There's plenty more fallacies, so if you would like me to cover some of the others, please let me know in the comments below. Logical fallacies can be tricky to spot, but it's important to keep them in mind whenever we are having discussions or debates. By understanding what they are and how they work, you'll be better equipped to make sound and logical arguments in the future. Please let me know in the comments. Were you aware of these fallacies? Are some of them new to you? Do you have other examples you can think of? And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Until next time!